I look forward to disappointing everybody here right now. There you go. OK. Hi. It's been a while. It's been 2 years since I've been up on a stage. I'm not sure if I can get this right. My name is Sunil Pai. I work at Cloudflare on the Workers team. I used to be on the React team. They got rid of me pretty quickly. And we have React stuff to talk about, but before I do that, I do want to start by saying that I've missed you all so much. This is so weird. I met a bunch of people at the speakers' dinner yesterday. And it's nice swapping stories, doing the same awkward hugs. There's the bro hug, there's the two-handed hug, there's the fist bump, there's the weird elbow thing, and I think it's time to retire that. But things have changed for me. As you can see, I get way better haircuts now. I dress a little nicer, and especially for the occasion, shout out to Tom Dale. Hope I'm doing you proud. I've been eating better. I've been exercising better the last 2 years. There's not been much else to do. But the thing that I am most proud of, and I am sharing it with all my personal friends here, is 2 days ago, I finished 500 days smoke-free. I quit smoking, which is just huge. I'm so happy. I'm very proud of it. Like, this is the thing that I've been telling everyone. I'm super happy about it. But it does leave me with one complication. This has been my GitHub avatar for the last, I want to say, like 10 years, like ever since I've had one. And it's cool. I used like Photoshop back in the day when I had a pirated copy. But it doesn't really represent me anymore. But a friend of mine did suggest a minor modification, and I will be uploading it later today. I think it's pretty good. This was actually made by Siddharth Kshetrapal, thanks to him, and he's not here today because his visa got screwed. Sucks, but look forward to his talk as well. But I think that's a good modification, and that's my story so far. Cool. Let's get to the talk. So 3 things you should know about the talk that I'm doing right now. It's kind of boring. We'll be talking about a couple of APIs, but if all goes well, you probably won't have to use it. Things will just happen. And that's nice. That's kind of a nice thing about React. Like, all the improvements are slightly incremental. Nobody really has to do any massive rewrites. You can leave old code as it is. This talk is a beta talk. Much like the actual APIs and the fact that React 18 is on the horizon, but you know that there's going to be about a year, 2 years of experimentation usually when these things come out. Much like that, this talk itself is also in beta. This is the first time that I've put it together, what we're talking about. And it also means that maybe over the next year, I'll be improving the talk. So if you spot any mistakes, sorry about that, but it'll get better. But this talk itself is in beta. This talk is also about the future. I don't usually do API talks. I like talking about like the work I've done. But this, I think, is exciting enough that and it's part of the React release that no one's really noticing. Everyone's talking about the cool hotness, which is server components and concurrent and all that. But I feel like this actually is way more defining for all the things we're going to be doing in the future. OK? So those are the 3 things. Let's jump straight into it. Standard interview question for all web developers, right? How does the internet work? And when they ask you that question, really the question is, hey, let's say you typed in reactadvanced.com into your browser. What happens? And there are a number of ways to talk about it. You can go into it in a lot of detail. You can talk about it at a broader level. I'm going to be talking about it as a conversation between a browser and the actual website. OK? Like, let's dive into it. So this is an Internet Explorer. So the E stands for Internet. Classic, that's the only browser that I've known. And it's talking to a new search engine I've invented called Google.com. Quite convenient that they're both an E, I think. And you ask it a question, right? Like, hey, what can you tell me about the Amazon rainforest? You actually type in Amazon rainforest in search. And search engine says, OK, hold up. I got you. I'll let you know. And it goes back to its services. And it says, hey, team, all y'all, what do we have for Pi that we can tell them about the Amazon rainforest? So maybe there's a photos team that says, OK, here are all these photos I have about the Amazon rainforest. Take this. The search engine's like, OK, cool. That's fine. That works. There's a flight service. Imagine that, a search engine giving you flight tickets. I think that would be a killer service. Nobody else is doing it, of course. And it says, hey, maybe Pi would like to fly to the Amazon rainforest this weekend. Here are tickets. Of course, I think it starts in December. It's going to be a little while away, but here are tickets for them. there's news about the Amazon rainforest because it's not in a great state right now. It's being burned to the ground and being razed, and there's news about it if you want to read it and get more depressed about the state of the world. But of course, there's a little video service as well, and it says, hey, here are some videos. If you'd like a 7-hour stream of just lush greenery, we got that too. Awesome. So then the search engine comes back and says, OK, I got stuff for you. Here it is. Let me present it to you. Oh, I forgot there are going to be 8 ads before you get to any of the content. It says, OK, fine. Here are a bunch of ads, possibly from another site that sounds like the Amazon rainforest. And here's a bunch of content. Not bad. So this is how it works, right? You start a conversation with a server. It gets a bunch of data, presents it in HTML as a website. So if we had to implement this in React as a React component, what would it look like? Well, you'd make a component. Let's call it an app component. You all can see the code, right? It's fine. We can see the slides later. You'll make an app component which has a header, a footer, and you'll write 5 components for your ads, images, videos, news, flights, which takes a bunch of data and renders it. Like, you'll pass it into something. So even the data itself, like, you'll fetch the data before you actually render the component, right? Like, you'll like, hey, give me all the ads for Amazon rainforest. Give me all the images. Give me the videos. Get all of it, and then render to string. This is what happens on the server. Usually, a meta framework like a Gatsby or a Next.js takes care of this for you. But you say render to string, get the data, and render it into it. Sure? OK. This is how it works. It's not great. There are some trade-offs with this model that you might have noticed. So one is that you can't really co-locate like the requests, like say get data with the actual component that asks for it, particularly on the server. You could probably do this on the client side, but on the server, because it's like a one-shot thing, you can't put them together. You have to get all the data first and like render it, or you have to do like other stuff. It blocks the whole page on the data. Can you imagine? Like, you won't be able to see any of the photos until all the videos have also been fetched. Or if one of them is slower, the other ones are blocked. Like, it needs to get all the data before it actually renders it down. Which is why you end up doing hacks, right? Like, it's great. There's a whole ecosystem of libraries and frameworks out there that, like your Next.js or your Gatsby, and fetching libraries like Apollo and Relay, and a whole bunch of GraphQL stuff. But let's admit to ourselves, like, it is kind of hacky that you have to build something separate that's not inside React itself to do these things. In the beginning, it was fine because it involved experimentation, but now you have to stitch up a whole thing and use a meta framework to do it. It's just a little ew, like it's not perfect, right? Like, you feel a little uncomfortable with this situation. You always have to like make trade-offs. Do you do all your compilation when you like build the page? What if it's like a site with like 100,000 pages? Do you have to do it like dynamically? It's kind of weird. But this is the state in like 2021, right? Like, it's kind of fine. I mean, many multi-million-dollar startups and companies have been made around this API, and other things, of course. But sure, of course, it's the website that got you the money. I don't think we should be fine with this. We can do better. I mean, this is a community that is built on experimentation and innovation. So let's take a little bit of a, let's keep that aside for a minute and talk about a feature that the internet has. It's an idea called streaming. The idea is that you should be able to send data down as soon as it's ready, even before you have everything else. I don't want to get into too many technical details about it. If you're interested, you can Google chunked transfer encoding for HTTP 1.1, and there's something else for HTTP 2. There's a whole bunch of specs. But I'll try to explain it as simply as I can, OK? So let's take the same website and like turn it on the side, OK? Like, imagine that it's coming from that side to that side. No, yeah, that side to that side, right? In your one-shot method, you'd send it all in one go. But in a streaming method, you would like stretch it out like chewing gum and send out the bits as soon as they come. So like, you'd be able to send a header immediately, then the ads as soon as they're ready, and then the photos, flights, news, videos, and then finally the footer. So what would it look like as a user when you start loading the site, right? So you'd start off with the header. You wait a bit, and then the ads pop in. Wait a little more, and the photos pop in, and the flights, and the news, and the videos, and then the footer. That's better. At the very least, you're not blocking like just the header being loaded for waiting for stuff like content to load, which is fine. And to be fair, I think Google actually does do like streaming. But We can't really do this in React land so far, of course, because it's still a one-shot. We can do better. Anyone who knows me knows that this is my mantra. The nice thing about being a UX engineer is that there's no upper boundary on how good you can make user experience, right? Like, you can just keep making it better and better. Anyway, so that was streaming. So let's keep that idea to the side. This is a React conference, after all. A couple of years ago, there was an experimental feature that was launched at ReactConf 2019. Holy shit, that's 2 years ago. That's a while. Anyway, they announced a feature called Suspense, right? You could mark components as react.lazy, and it would load it asynchronously, and you could use Suspense to mark like a spinner. There's also data fetching. The problem is that that never really worked with render to string or server rendering and stuff. So some people use it for like client-side apps, and it's nice. And it's a good model. So we'll just quickly dive into it and see what it looks like, right? Like, so in this model, for the same page flow that we just discussed, you would have, let's say, an ads component that fetches some data inside it and then like renders that data. Quick thing to note is that there's bit of a glitch in the matrix. You'll notice that there's no await statement. And the way React does this is kind of funky. If you're interested in diving into the details, it like throws a promise, or it doesn't matter to a developer as you're using it. You just write it like it's synchronous code, and you can use it. By the way, I've been using GitHub Copilot, so I did this, and right after this, I wrote function images, and it filled in all the code for me. You all been using GitHub Copilot? It's kind of scary good. It's AI for your code. It fills in your code. Anyway, so you would also have an images component that just takes the search term, figures out what images are there for it, and like spits out the HTML the DOM tree that would work for it. Similarly for videos and for the ads and so on. And then what you would do is you'd revisit your app component, and you'd wrap all of this with a suspense component, and you'd give it a fallback, right? Let's say a spinner. And the nice thing about the experience for this, when it's a client-side app, is that you will have a spinner that waits for all the data to load and then finally renders it. So the experience would be, hey, you'd render a header and a footer and a big spinny spinner in the middle. I should choose a better one. It's not quite, yeah, it's fine for now. You ship it, right? So it waits for it, it fetches all the data, and as soon as that's done, it renders the content. That's not bad. But we can do even better. That's the mantra for today, right? Let's say that you can also like mark each of those components with like a suspense boundary. And let's say for the sake of discussion here, each of them have the same spinner. You wrap all them up. And then the loading experience for it is, hey, like it starts off with like 5 spinners. Maybe the flights loads first. Not bad. Then after that, maybe the ads load. Then maybe close to each other, the news and the videos load. And then right after that, the photos load. That's not bad, too. Like, at least as content comes, it doesn't wait for everything. As content comes in, it renders in. But still not so great. Like, you want to load it at least in kind of order, even if the data resolves. We can do better. One of my favorite components, by the way, is a component called Suspense list. Mark that out with the green boundaries. You can see the code later, but let's to know that you can actually group together suspense components. And you can say, hey, reveal these as in a forward order. You can also make it backwards. You can make it all together. It's a lot of fun. Feel free to try it out. Anyway, so you can say, hey, make sure that the ads load first. At least they render first, even if the data for the others loads later. So just so we're clear, the data for all of them is happening at the same time, but it just makes sure that the first one is rendered. And then I group the other 4 inside another suspense list, nested suspense list. That's cool. And say that I want those forwards as well. OK, so what does the experience for that look like? Again, we start off with about 5 spinners. There might be data, so the ads load in. Some content might have actually loaded for the others, but we have marked that it needs to load in this order. The photos load. Then let's say the next one loads really quickly. So you have flights and news. And then like the videos load. That's a much better user experience. But the problem, of course, here is that this is now a fully client-side rendered app, right? So we have this trade-off. We have these 2 trade-offs. One, we can either generate all the HTML on the server side, but you have this janky programming model, and you have to like make sure you have hacks or like a whole bunch of optimizations doesn't really gel well with the React model. Or you can do it completely client-side and have ostensibly a better user experience once all the JavaScript loads, but like load performance is worse. It takes a long time for the JavaScript to load, and then the requests have to go from the browser. So you got to do one or the other, right? The mantra, we can do better. So this is the one API that I've been talking about. It takes render to string, which we've been using for the last 5 years, and it's been fine. And it replaces it with render to readable stream. Right? So we can now do streaming rendering with React. I just want to recap like how good this is, OK? All right, so let's just recap. OK, so we're going to look at the same thing that we looked at right before this. Traditional streaming looks like this. It stretches it out like chewing gum or like a rubber band, I guess, whatever, and starts loading things one after the other. So the header would load, then the ads would load, photos, and like with all these blank spaces, which is fine, but it's loading, right? And videos, and the footer. So this is what we could get if we had used traditional streaming, which we can't, just so we're clear, but if we could, and possibly how Google already does it. But with render to readable stream, you can start off with the spinners. Wait a little bit, the ads load, the photos, the flights, the news, the videos. And here's the kicker. That entire experience happens before any of your JavaScript loads. This entire experience is happening down the HTML. You can have a superior user experience without JavaScript on your page. So how does it actually do this? It's kind of cool. I have like one slide to show you this, but really you should dive into it after this talk, all right? So what it does is it sends that shell ahead, and it knows that because that's the component model that we've done. But as soon as the page is over, it starts sneaking in little hidden divs with the content inside it. It's fancy as well. It's not fancy as hell. It's actually like quite a hack. It works really well, even for like SEO and stuff. And as soon as each of these bits like load in, there's like one line of not even one line of JavaScript. It's like one function call that just says, hey, take this div and replace the spinner like with this content. There's no React on the page, no nothing. You could even remove it, and you still get the same experience. So that's pretty dope, I think. And this is like pretty fundamental to the rest of the React. The innovation that we'll probably see over the next year, like server components, the new hotness built on this stack. Any ideas that you have for like new CSS and JS libraries? Because it's been a while since we have had a new one. Might as well make 12 more over the next year. You might want to make sure that it works well with the streaming rendering model. You could data fetching now like becomes way more interesting, right? Because now instead of like the hydration step being like one blob of data that you like just inject in there, and you can do it piece by piece if you want. Lots of fun stuff. Anyway, so just to recap. So the new server rendering features that we have, once you replace render to string with just one line, which is render to readable stream, Suspense just works. This is a huge deal. It's not worked for the last 2 years, so which is why a lot of people haven't even used it in React apps, but now it just works. React.lazy, all that. You get to do loading patterns. Again, without JavaScript, without your JavaScript bundle on the page, just works. Like you can use suspense list and suspense boundaries. Very cool. This is my favorite thing. The spinners work actually without the JavaScript bundle on the page and in an order that you can decide, which is, honestly, I feel like all frameworks should steal this idea. And of course, they steal from React all the time and say, oh, we're already better. Then again, they do ship before React does, which is like years sometimes. Do you see why they didn't want me on the team anymore? But then there's like a bonus feature, and I actually didn't like include it in here because I didn't think I'd have time. So the page can actually start racing your JavaScript bundle with the server streaming. So in the beginning, when you start up, it starts streaming down all this HTML, right? But it can also start loading the JavaScript. Usually, the first time you're visiting the page, the JavaScript bundle might take like a little longer to load. But the second time you visit the page, it's cached, which means the JavaScript bundle loads immediately. At this point, React tells the page, this is not a server-rendered page anymore. It's now a client-side app. And it like immediately takes over, so it can load even faster than the server-rendered page. Wild feature. Just love it. So it can actually raise client and server-side. Very cool. So these are all like cool features, but there are trade-offs, right? That's the other thing I say. Like, none of this stuff is actually free. What you really need to do now is you need to run like your own server runtime. Some of you folks might have been just using something like a Create React app or something that was client-side only. But if you want these performance benefits and a better programming model, just happier users really, you now need to like invest into like a server runtime. So you have like two major choices to do this. One is Node.js. Love Node. It took me from a toy JavaScript UX developer, and it made me effectively a full-stack developer. Love it. Didn't even have to change much. It was just plain JavaScript. Shout out to like Browserify and stuff. It was pretty great days, about 10 years ago. But what you do is you either like have to like rent hardware, a VPS, or one of those things with hosts like Heroku, DigitalOcean. I don't know. I haven't done it in years. I assume there are others on the market. Relax, it's just a dry cough. I'm fine. Yeah, so you pick one of these machines, and you then have to like set it up. You have to like set up process monitors. Like the moment it dies, you need to do like a restart and monitoring. It's fine, I guess. I'm excited about stuff like Fly.io. Fly.io tries to basically give you like heavy metal on like the edge. Picks like a bunch of cities, and you can pick it and deploy your code onto it. Shout out to Kent. He deployed his site onto it, and it's like really fast, really great service. And they're doing like some very cool stuff. They seem to have hired a bunch of interesting people. But it still isn't like trivial. Like you still kind of have to deal with your server. Or you do what's called like serverless computing, right? Which is your AWS Lambda or your Vercel, which is fine. But the problem is that they don't actually support like streaming. The API ostensibly does, but what it does is kind of like buffers it, and only once it's done does it send the content down the pipe, which kind of ruins the effect that you want, right? Like you want it to like load early. So that's choice one, which you could do today. I bet some of you have your stuff up on Node. It's not a bad choice. Also, Node isn't really built like for the Lambda use case, which is the server-side use case. Like it takes something like 200 ms, like last I checked. I don't know, I could be wrong about these numbers. It takes about 100 to 200 milliseconds just to start up. You can look for cold start time, and you'll see people talking about it, I guess. But choice two is this new breed of serverless computing that's happening across the world. Cloudflare, my employer, has something called Workers. Fastly has something called Edge at Compute. If anyone has used it, let me know. Like, it's very hard to use it right now, but I hear great things about it. The new kid on the block is, of course, Deno. They have something called Deno Deploy. Shopify has something very interesting, which is they have their own runtime and framework for deploying Shopify-specific components, and I think someone's speaking about it later in the conference. I'm super looking forward to it. Very exciting work. Gatsby, I think, now runs. Gatsby used to be a static site generator, but they're not so much, but they're not openly admitting it, and they run something called Gatsby Cloud, which is cool, by the way. It's called DST, very cool tech. I think Siddharth is here. He'll be talking about it later. And there are going to be more. There will be a lot more people who will be. I expect more people to like try this out. And there are some usual patterns with it. So I would like to talk about Cloudflare Workers because, I mean, I picked them. They pay me for this. It's kind of nice. So Cloudflare Workers, right? It's a standard-based runtime. You can do stuff like fetch, regular request response, a whole bunch of web standard APIs. No DOM APIs, but you don't need that on the server side so much. I mean, you have React there, of course. Which is nice. The code is like super simple. You don't have to like spin up and say a port. No, you just export a function called fetch that responds to a request and returns a response. Super nice. It's across 250 cities across the world. 250 cities also, like it's a small number and a big number. Like it's the biggest network, I think, right now. And they have deals with something like 10,000 partners or some shit like that. The employees aren't told where in the cities the actual data center is, by the way. So we like joking amongst ourselves that it's either underneath the tube or it's in the air traffic tower in Heathrow, because that's where you get best reception. It's either that or the BT tower. We're not sure. Anyway, but like massive network across the world. And the numbers are kind of wild. Well, because they have such a great network, they're within about 20 milliseconds of like 80% of the connected world. And like within 50 milliseconds of 95% of the like internet connected world. And to show you how fast that is, I want you all to try something with me, okay? All right? I want you to blink as fast as you can, okay? Like try to count how fast you can do it per second. Okay, ready? I'm like the blinking meme dude, right? Like, anyway, so I can do about like 3 to 5 times a second. But Cloudflare can do about 10 to 50 requests in the same amount of time, which means that if you like actually write your site well, you can load your whole website in like a second, maybe 2. It's really fast. It's like scary how fast it is. And what I really like about stuff like Workers and the other runtimes is that they all have like 0 startup time. There's none of this cold start time or anything like it. It just starts up. You can start it, React starts up, take some data, throw it down the thing. But it's not just good enough to have a runtime that runs your JavaScript. You also need some kind of persistence, because if you have this JavaScript here, but your database is, I don't know, halfway across the world, still not great. So Workers also provides a little key value store, which is just, hey, for this key, store this data, and then like you can fetch it where you want, which is also replicated across the entire network, which means the runtime and like the data is, well, on the top of BDTAR. And we also have like this sci-fi thing called durable objects, which is just the coolest thing I've heard of. They're literally JavaScript objects that can move from data center to data center depending on who's asking for it. It's wild. What that means is, let's say and you can like use it for like WebSockets and synchronization and stuff, which means that let's say I'm talking to a friend in, let's say San Francisco. I don't know anything about American geography, but let's say that New York is between London and San Francisco. Maybe. Let's say, somewhere midway. It's probably somewhere in the, I don't know. But so the durable object that we use to like establish a WebSocket connection between each other could potentially like migrate to New York so that we get the best data to talk amongst each other. And then let's say a third person joins us from China, in which case like maybe the object figures out the centroid of these 3 locations. It's all very sci-fi. I can't, like, this is, like, we're trying to figure out what the database story around it here is, but this is, like, very novel invention, and we're, like, dying to see, like, what people, like, build with it. But, and there's, like, so much more. And when I say so much more, I mean, like, Cloudflare has a deep portfolio of services, and you should totally go check it out. But there are also so many cool things we're building that I'm not allowed to tell you yet. What you do is you buy me a beer right after the conference, and then like I'll start talking a little bit. But I can't do it on screen. Hey, boss manager. Anyway, so you can go explore more at workers.cloudflare.com. There's like a startup. There's a CLI you use, and you can like just start writing JavaScript, and it works. Be getting better soon. But the vision really for Workers, and I assume all these other runtimes, right, is I want to stop calling it serverless. What I really like to imagine it as is like, it's one server that envelopes the world like a buckyball with like your database also around it. Anyone taking a photo of this? I look like a maniac, I'm sure. So you can envelop the entire world in like this mesh. Right now it's 250 cities. It could be thousands in the future. We might give you some hardware that you can just chuck behind your washing machine, and then you could FTP into it and like set your website up just like the 90s. It'll be great. Anyway, so edge networks like this are such a good fit for the React streaming model. Do you see? Like, it's instantaneous. Like, we can give experiences that are way better than anyone's had in the past 30 years. Wow, the web is getting old. So while there is going to be an incremental story where we improve all these things, what I really think is going to happen is that this is a big reset moment for React. Of course, all the popular libraries will still work with the existing model. The team itself is collaborating with CSS and JS library authors, data fetching library authors, and it'll work well. But I think there's potential for us to do like more. Like, for example, Node really doesn't run on these networks, which means Next.js doesn't really run on it. I don't know, Next.js might make, the Vercel folks might make some changes there. But it sure would be nice if we started exploring, saying, hey, if we had to build something from scratch, which used streaming as a rendering model, server components for data fetching, way more lightweight libraries, and the ability to talk to APIs like durable objects and KV stores, what could we do? I want to leave you on that note. I want you to start thinking about what this means for React and the ecosystem. A lot of the complaints about React have been like bigger bundles, and over-engineering and JavaScript fatigue. But maybe this is a moment for us to start removing the fatigue, to like simplifying the stack, to start removing the parts that we have needed just to be able to have a competent stack. And maybe we could have like a different story. I don't know. I'm going to try. I expect everyone else to, because I don't usually ship my libraries anymore. But there are folks out there who will look at me and be like, yeah, fine, challenge accepted. And I totally would like to see that. There are some links. Well, you can just literally Google React 18 working group, and you can find a bunch of details about what I was talking about today, how to upgrade to the new API, guides for library authors for how to upgrade their authors, how you could possibly build a new JavaScript runtime if the next big serverless entrepreneur is in the crowd here somewhere or watching this in the future. There's a whole list of, Sebastian from the team wrote down a list of things that you can do to make it better. Yeah, I look forward to it. I'm super excited about this very simple API that I don't expect many people to use by hand, but I expect will be redefining the experience for React in the future. My name is Sunil. You can find me at 3.1 on Twitter, which is the worst thing to spell out to somebody on the phone when you want to tell them what your email address is. Yes, it's 3.1, all words, no numbers, no dots. You can reach out to me there. I'm happy to talk to you after this. And I'm looking forward to talking to all of you at the conference and grabbing a beer after this. Thank you so much.